Hello, everybody. Everybody in the back hear me? Little thumbs up back there. Great. All right, let's go ahead and get started. This is Introduction to Microservices, INT17. We'll be using that session code throughout the session as we set up some of our microservices. My name is Mike Burgee. I'm a senior application developer / team lead for a platinum partner called Mainspring Incorporated. So we'll start off with a little bit about me. I'm a certified FileMaker developer. I took the 18 test from home, so pretty happy about that. I didn't have to drive to the testing center. Certified in versions 11 through 18. At Mainspring, I lead a small team of developers as their project manager and their kind of training expert and mentor. I also do training for as a service for other people. And when I do have time, I actually do a little bit of development as well, which is great. I'm a full stack developer, and what that means is I do the back end and the front end stuff. But aside from the FileMaker platform, I also develop PHP-based web applications, including the Laravel platform and WordPress. I've been a PHP developer for about a long time, 20 plus years now. I was doing that for a while before I came to FileMaker. Most of you know me from around the community, Facebook, on the official community page, and such fun projects in working together with FileMaker to test products. I'm on the beta test team. That's super exciting for me that I got to be a part of Claris Connect and that beta test. So I'm looking forward to the ETS for that as well, and the eventual rollout so I can actually bring it to my clients and integrate it. A fun fact about me, you've been watching me drive around my 1992 Suzuki Cappuccino, which is a small micro race car that I imported from Japan that I do autocross timed lap racing in. So that's me knocking over cones maybe, I don't know. I didn't look too closely. So let's talk about our goals for this session. Now, this session is going to be demo heavy. And my demos are all going to be live. I don't have anything pre-recorded, no safety net. So if things go wrong, which sometimes they do, I have white papers and resources for you to back up for how to go through step by step through these things on your own as well. Those will be available in my session materials almost immediately after the session is over. So we're going to start off with talking about the microservice architecture, what that means. How is it different than how we normally think about complete applications? When is it appropriate to use that? Because it's not always appropriate, and especially when you think about FileMaker, where we're trying to get our full application experience in one place. How do we integrate microservices with the FileMaker platform? So we're going to do 2 demos today that are integrating other services with FileMaker to use them as part of that larger app experience. The two demos we're going to do are using AWS Lambda to run a microservice function. And I'm also very excited to be able to demo Claris Connect for you today. And then finally, we'll end by discussing some resources that you can do for further reading. Where is it appropriate for you to get help in the community? So let's start by talking about the microservice architecture. Now, if you were to start with the opposite of the microservice architecture, it would be using a monolithic design. A monolithic design is very much what FileMaker would be like if you had all of your different layouts, all of your different database portions. Whoa, fingers crossed. Everything together in one place. And the problem with that is usually that if one part of that breaks, you have a whole chain of dependencies that's counting on that one piece where they'll also break. So the microservice architecture is designed to separate out those individual. I'm not going to step on the front of the stage anymore. I'm going to stand back here. All right. Stop the blinking. By separating out those separate functions and features and components into their smallest point, you might want to start looking for a new coupler up here. Is that blinking for you guys too? Yes. All right. because it's blinking for me on all these screens. So I might, the borrowed adapter I have might be being a little flaky, but we'll see. Try not to let it distract me too much. So when you separate out those components into their own individual smaller components, they become highly portable. You can take them, you can host them in different places, different servers, you can copy them and paste them. They move around very easily, which makes them fast for integrating services. Breaking it down to a smaller component also makes it highly testable. You can run individual unit tests on that small microservice. You know that to integrate that microservice, you're going to need to know what you need to put into it to get data, and what you're going to expect back from that. So you can use that to write tests for it. Since it's loosely coupled, I'm just going to have to deal with it, I guess. Since it's loosely coupled, that means if you have one part of your system that breaks, it's not going to affect the other parts of your system in a negative way. And also, that allows you to couple different things together very quickly. Singular. Guys in the back, could I possibly trouble you for a mini display port to HDMI adapter if you can find a replacement to make sure that that's not what's causing this? Thanks. So when you have things singularly organized, it makes it very easy to develop your microservice. Your microservice is going to be a component that does one thing, and it does that one thing very well. With this singular organization, it makes it easy to plan for what your service is going to do. It makes it easy for you to organize your code. It makes it easy to be efficient and run that microservice quickly. And then lastly, microservices versus APIs versus plugins versus native. So there are things that are a microservice that are also an API, that are also a plugin, and that are also native. So if you think of a giant Venn diagram that overlaps all four of these things, and excuse me while I swap this out, if you can think of a service that overlaps into all four of these things, you can have a microservice that runs a very specific function. See that showing up. All right, let's give that one a try. It does one specific thing very well for you, like if you want a document conversion microservice that converts Word documents to PDF files. That can be a microservice. You can integrate using that microservice using an API. You could possibly be using that as a local service running in a plugin, like maybe it's a Java library that's running in ScriptMaster or something. Or it might be something that you do native, like if you have a web viewer in your FileMaker file that takes some input from your record, uses some JavaScript in the web viewer, and then you scrape that result out. So all of these things fit within this microservice architecture, but they can also be their own separate thing. So we'll talk about what fits, what doesn't fit, but there's no reason why you can't use things that aren't a microservice as that smaller portion. So credit to microservices.io for this demonstration, but what we're demonstrating here is that you have 3 microservices set up, one to handle your accounting, or your accounts, one for your inventory, and one for your shipping service. Each one of those has their own separate database, and then as you're chaining through a local web application or your mobile app, you integrate with each one of those microservices. So if, in this example, if your inventory system went down, your account service would still be running, your shipping service would still be running, so those parts of your business would not be affected. All right. So let's talk about when you should be using microservices. So a great use case for microservices is mixed environments. And as we saw today in the opening presentation, there are thousands of apps online, all trying to compete and connect with each other very quickly. So when you have mixed environments, like you're using DocuSign for signing your documents, but you're also using FileMaker for your CRM, and you're using MailChimp for your email campaigns, microservices work great because you can connect each one of those components together to build your full app experience. If you are a vertical developer, or if you're developing the similar file for all of your clients, like you want to offer something like a MailChimp service for everybody, the microservice architecture allows you to very easily copy and paste that singular code to multiple places to deploy it for multiple clients. Because of the testability of it, because you can separate it out into its smallest component and make that very robust, it's also durable. So it's less prone to breaking, because when you're changing your app at large, the microservice remains unaffected. So that code is going to keep running, pretty much unless your hardware goes down to run it. And if you're running a microservice in the cloud, that's extremely rare. Security is another reason why you should consider using microservices, because you can control the method for which that microservice is integrated through an API key or a set of OAuth credentials. You can control the security for that microservice. You can also control it by making that microservice a smaller portion that doesn't actually edit data in the database. Say you just want to validate an address or something like that. So you can send the address to that microservice to validate it and get the result back. It never actually touches your database, so it's in its own little secure silo. Great part about it, and what I'm going to show you today using Lambda, is that you can run a microservice as a serverless application. Now what that means is you don't need to pay for a server to be on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Serverless architecture lets you receive that request, run that code for your microservice only for a couple hundred milliseconds, and then as it sends the result out, it closes itself down. And the only part you have to pay for is that small little bit of compute time. So if you have an application like an enrollment period where you're only going for 2 weeks out of the year, or you are only doing call center stuff between 9 to 5, you're in a serverless architecture, you're only paying for that compute time rather than having to have a much larger infrastructure that's always up and running with the associated IT costs for that. And then lastly, a great place to use it is when you need to do dataless applications. So what I mean by that is things like the document conversion, where you're not storing any data in a database. You're just taking data in, doing something with that, sending out an email, sending an SMS, converting a format, and then sending the result of that back out to whoever requested that. All right. So let's talk about the ways we can integrate microservices with the FileMaker platform. There are a lot of ways you can use microservices architecture in the FileMaker platform. This screenshot is now going to be familiar. I've already seen it in a couple sessions today, so we'll talk about that at the end here. But the first is API method integration. Now this we've already been doing, and most people, how many people here have integrated an API into their FileMaker system? Almost more than half, easily, which is great. So you're already using the microservices architecture, even if you don't know it, if you're integrating an API. Probably. So for instance, if you did a MailChimp integration, you are using MailChimp as a microservice. MailChimp functions on its own even if you don't use that API. You're coupling it with your system through a loosely coupled API format. MailChimp has been tested. It's scalable. It runs, uptime, pretty much all the time. It's got its own security credentials. It's essentially a microservice. So if you integrate that with using APIs, you're integrating that, whatever that API service is, as a microservice to your own app environment. Second method is a local service. This is probably not going to have as many show of hands, but say for instance, if you have something that runs as a command line program where you feed a file path into the command line and tell a program to run something with that, but it only works locally on your computer. That's going to be something using send event or perform Apple script, or maybe a plugin like bbox where it's executing a local script. Just something that lives on the machine itself and is called by the user to interact and do something. Next up is the web viewer. Anybody attend Jeremy Brown's training day session on JavaScript? Yeah. If you haven't seen that, he has a demo file with a whole bunch of different examples. So let's take, for instance, JavaScript calendar, like what we saw this morning. You can set that up as a microservice. You can set that up as a modular thing that receives your FileMaker event information, generates the calendar in the view, and then uses a URL, a dynamic URL, to push events back out to FileMaker. That's something that you can copy and paste over and over again. It's something you can isolate in your own small demo file and test over and over again. So WebViewer is actually a really great way to integrate those kinds of microservices. Plugins works great for the dataless integrations. There's tons of plugins that do actions like, send an SMS, perform a curl request, or send a full HTML formatted email, that type of thing. Those are all things where they're not really storing data in your database at all, but you're still interacting with them. So FileMaker as, I came up with this acronym myself, FileMaker as a microservice, or FAM. You can use FileMaker as a microservice because it has a standardized REST API to interact with your file. So if you set up a contacts database or a CRM, any of the vertical guys selling stuff in the vendor's exhibit hall, they can set up their application as a microservice. So if they have a CRM or if they have an email campaign manager, the other demo I'm going to give here in a minute is going to be an event management service. So you can use FileMaker as the provider for that microservice for other applications. So if you have clients that are using online CRMs, or if you have clients that are using online like document repositories, you can couple that together with FileMaker in a small portion or your whole system. If it's your whole system, it's not really a microservice anymore, but if you have just a specific function, you can definitely use FileMaker as a microservice. And then the last one, which was just recently added, and I've had the pleasure to test, is Claris Connect. So Claris Connect fits very well in the microservice architecture because it's testable. You can copy, you can reproduce your flows over and over again for different systems, and it's also very easy. But it's also logic-based, so this flow image that I have up here performs a very methodical list of steps in a row with logic, trapping for things, with the ability to test each separate portion and then couple them all together. All right. So I'm going to break into the demo now. That was the let's get ready for the demo part. So now we're going to switch over. I'm going to sit down for this, so don't mind me. I like walking around the stage, but also I like doing demos live. So again, disclaimer on this, we're going to do the Lambda demo first here. So what we're doing in this demo essentially is you've gotten a request from your development team who takes all of their notes in Markdown that they want. They've been communicating with the sales team, and the sales team doesn't want to read Markdown to view the developer notes or the documentation. So the developers have asked you to come up with some sort of service to convert that to HTML so that they can display it to the sales team in a format that looks a lot nicer than Markdown. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a microservice based on a JS library that's open source. We're going to host that on AWS as a Lambda function. We're going to set up an API interface with an authorization token. And then we're going to integrate that service with FileMaker using an API. So now the fun starts. So the first thing we're going to do is set up the code locally on our computer so that we can pull all the code libraries, the code dependencies that we need. So to do that, you need to install Node. Now, if you haven't installed Node, you can just go to nodejs.org and download the installer for your appropriate platform. They have Mac and Windows, Linux, and stuff on there. To check if you've already got it installed, so I use an editor, a command line editor called iTerm, but you can do this in your terminal as well. But you just want to do node-v, and that's going to tell me that I have version 10.15.3 installed. Can everybody read this? Great. I blew up the text a little bit. So I'm glad that everybody can read it. So Node also installs what's called Node Package Manager. And Node Package Manager is used to download those repositories from open source places like GitHub and install them into your application directory. So for the microservice little app that we're building, we're going to download a JavaScript dependency so we can use that. So if you want to check, you can do npm for Node Package Manager, -v for version, and I have 6.441. So great, that's it. So if you're already this far, you're already ready to go. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a local project for us to download our code into. So I'm going to start here at the command prompt, and this is the root folder of my user folder. So I'm going to make a directory. And I'm going to call this directory INT17. And then I'm going to go into that directory using cd, change directory, INT17. So now you can tell I'm in that directory. I'm ready to go. So the first thing I need to do, I'm starting a Node project, so I need to initiate my Node project locally. And I do that with npm, Node Package Manager, init, and -y. So what that does is it makes a package.json file, and you can see the contents of it there in my folder to kind of track my Node project. And it'll use that to store my dependencies later so that when I upload this to the web with those dependencies later, when Lambda loads my function, it'll be able to say, okay, it's dependent on this package, so I'm also going to load this package as well. And you can see it created an index.js file for me as well or it at least told me that that's where my main file is going to be pointing, which is right. So even if it didn't create that index.js, we will do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to install a package called Showdown. And let me find it. So if you search GitHub for Showdown, this is that project. Now from here it has installation notes for npm. So it says npm install Showdown. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to come back here and do npm install Showdown. And here's where we find out if the internet works or not. Because it's going to go pull that down from GitHub. There we go. Created a lock file. Added 50 packages from 24 contributors. Now if I go to Finder and I go to my local folder and I find INT17 and I look under node modules, you'll see that it downloaded all of these. These are dependencies for that Showdown package. So Showdown uses its own JavaScript code packages, but somewhere in here is a Showdown folder. So this is this is the code that it downloaded. So it downloads all that code for me. I don't need to worry about like downloading a zip file and putting it in the right place or else. So Node Package Manager is great for that. So now we're going to run our local one. I don't know if I have this app.js yet. No. Node index.js. Well, I'm not going to worry about running it locally because we're uploading this anyways. So what I do want to show you is I use a code editor called VSC, Microsoft Visual Code, Visual Studio Code, sorry. And I'm going to open my folder in here. So I'm going to open the folder. I'm going to navigate to that. Users, Mike Bergy, INT17. So when I open that, I can see that I do not have an index.js file. So I'm going to create an index.js file because that file is going to be what we run when we upload this to Lambda. So we're going to code this, and I think I'm actually just going to take the easy way here because of the time, and I'm going to grab my index.js from another location. Really need to update my dependency so it stops up automatically opening Sublime. All right, so this is the code of our microservice, and I'm going to walk you through it. I'm just not going to type it out right now. So the first part of this is we have an exports.handler. Exports means that we're sending something back to whatever requested it. Handler is just something that, you know, this is what's going to handle any requests coming into this function. So we've got a asynchronous function, which means whoever's requesting this function is going to wait for it to finish. And then the function is going to receive an event and a context from the request that's coming in to Lambda. So when Lambda runs this request, you have an event and a context. It's very similar to a script trigger and FileMaker with the context of whatever layout and data set you're on when you run that. Sublime's trying, oh, come on, quit. Quit. Sorry about that. Haven't opened that one up in a while. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create an object as a variable of our Showdown processor. So Showdown is a library that converts that markdown format text into HTML for us. So in order for us to use it, we just have to say, okay, I am going to create a variable called Showdown that says require Showdown. I'm going to create a converter that is a new Showdown converter. So now I can use converter to convert my markdown to HTML. So my HTML is going to be equal to that converter.makeHTML. So that converter object now has an HTML function, makeHTML function. And I'm going to feed it the event from up here. So the event that Lambda is passing into this function for me through the API that we're going to set up is coming in, and the part of that we're going to convert is going to be the body of that event request. So now that I've done that, this HTML represents my already converted markdown. So all I need to do now is return that to the API user that requested it. So I'm going to return here a status code of 200 saying, yep, it works, it's good. And the body of my return response, I'm going to convert my my converted markdown and a status message into JSON for the return, so that when the API gets it back, they will expect a JSON array of that status message and my message of converted markdown. So that's it. That is everything I need to do locally. So what we need to do now is set up the Lambda side of this. So I'm going to go into the AWS Lambda control panel. So if you log into AWS If you have an AWS account, you just search for Lambda here. I've got it in my recent ones. And I have a previous one that I ran in here. That's my backup in case this one goes horribly wrong. So what we're going to do in here is we're going to create a function. On the next page, we're going to actually author this from scratch. So we're writing all the code ourselves, but Lambda also has the ability to choose from a number of blueprints so that you can set up functions for that. There's actually a microservices framework in here that you can use. So if you search this for microservices, there's an HTTP endpoint and also a Python microservice template that you can use. But I'm going to go back to author from scratch. My function name, I'm going to name this INT17. And we're going to use Node.js, which is similar for what we used locally. You can see there's a bunch of other languages as well. So if you're a Python guy, you can run a Python service. If you're familiar with Java, you can convert your Java stuff. And then permissions is basically what are we going to do, or what Amazon user is going to be running this service, this function every time it's requested. So I'm just going to say create a new role with basic Lambda permissions. All right, create function. Pray to the internet gods that this works. Okay, so once we've created our function, it gives us a relatively easy to use interface for dealing with our app. Now everything is, again, loosely coupled in our service, so you can couple different things together. So the first thing I want to do before I upload my code is actually to interact with this microservice, I'm going to need to add some sort of communication interface to it. So I want to set up an API for it. So I'm going to add a trigger over here. And there's a bunch of preset triggers here that you can use. So there's some cool stuff in here, IoT stuff, CloudFront. You can essentially use SNS, which means that like I can hit a webhook endpoint to run my service. Say, for instance, if I use SES to send an email and that email bounces back, I can kick it off to write a record to my database. So it's really funny because the next demo I'm going to show you a very similar connection method, but it's going to be a lot easier than this. But this is an advanced class, and I want to make sure I show you guys something advanced. So what we're going to do is an API gateway. And that API gateway, I'm going to create a new API for this. Security, I'm going to call this open with an API key. So you can use an AWS login. You can leave it open, which is insecure, and I don't even know why that's an option. But we're going to do the simplest integration, which is using an API key. Now under additional names, we really don't need any of these additional things for now. So I'm just going to click add that. And just like that, an API gateway has been added on to my service. So you see the API gateway is going to flow into my function here, and that is going to also log the results of that function to CloudWatch. So CloudWatch comes pre-connected. So I'm going to click again on my function right here in the middle, scroll down, and you'll see my function code. So this already comes with an index.js file right here for you as a default. So you can see it's got that exports handler, but also you can see that the handler field up here is pointed to index.handler. So you can choose your runtime here again if you need to change it. You can choose edit code inline, but you notice the second option here is upload a zip file or upload from Amazon S3. So we want a zip file. So we're going to go to that folder, that INT17. We're going to grab all of this and we're going to compress it into, and I'll just rename that code.zip. So I want to upload that so it's now online. So I'm just going to flip back over, upload a zip file, click on the upload button, go to INT17, find our code file, hit open, and I'm going to hit save. I think that's what actually uploads it. So there we go. So here is our code here. I could have copied and pasted that index.js code, but the thing that's important is that I get all my dependencies uploaded. So all of those things that I downloaded through npm are now here as well and part of my function. So there are some other settings in here. I'm not going to dive into them in an hour. You could spend, all day, an entire training series on how to use Lambda, but this is it. My microservice is now ready to go. So the first thing we want to do is make this testable. So to test it, we're going to use a program called Postman. Anybody go to John Renfrew's session about using Postman, how to call a Postman? Watch the video on that. And I just need to make sure I don't need to save again. If you haven't used Postman before, it's an open source application you can use to essentially test your endpoints. I'm not sure if this is really zoomable. I guess it is, but it kind of takes, I don't need the sidebar, I don't think. All right, so basically what we want to do is we want to feed it a place to send our request to. Now, when we set up that API gateway, if I click on that, you see down here I have information that is the API endpoint. So this is where I need to send my API request to use this Lambda function service. So I'm going to copy the link address there. I'm going to go back to Postman, and I'm going to paste that in place. All right. Now remember, we didn't leave this open, so we're also going to need a way to authenticate. So we're doing that with an API key. Now how you add that is through a curl header called x-api-key. So I'm going to go back here. Here's the API key that it generated for me, so I'm going to copy that. And I'm going to drop that in here and paste. I'm going to save this just in case. All right, so we're all set up and ready to go. So how do we test this? So the logical thing is to write some Markdown, send it, and see if we get HTML back. So Markdown, if you haven't used Markdown before, it's actually my preferred way of taking notes. And actually, the session notes from this session will come in Markdown, as well as my session tomorrow. Basically, this is header 1, header 2. This is like heading 3. You can do bullets. You can do nested bullet. You can do all kinds of things, like ordered list. I forget if it's one dot or not. Ordered list. Ordered list. So I'm going to send this Markdown off to this endpoint, and we're going to see what we get back. So I don't think I've missed anything, but let's see what we get back. This is all about doing it live so we can test. All right. So there we go. So you see we got JSON back from this. There's status OK. And we now have HTML here. And now in Postman, if I switch over from pretty, which will show the JSON in a pretty format, to preview, which processes HTML, it will show me my Markdown has been converted to HTML. See, I've got a couple line breaks in here. Those \n's are line breaks. But you can see I've got heading 1, heading 2, heading 3. I've got bullet list and ordered list. So that function's set up and running. It's working. We know it's working, so we're ready to integrate it with FileMaker. So in FileMaker, I am going to open this file. So this file will come in the session materials, and basically what I've done here is I've taken the content management starter app that comes with FileMaker. I've added Wim-de-Kort's custom function library to this file. If you go under File Manage Custom Functions, there's a load of functions that come with that are specific to dealing with building curl requests. Oh, and it's a really cool part of Postman, but if you go up here to Postman and you hit this little code thing, it'll give you your curl request. So if you're ever struggling to figure out what headers do I need to send, or what curl options I need to use in FileMaker to integrate an API, Postman's a great way to get that information straight out. So I've added a simple script here that converts the contents of the related notes table into Markdown based on our Lambda function. And I've also added a web viewer to display that HTML content. So you see I put 2 settings on here, and I think I still have my API key in the clipboard. And I'll go back here and copy this URL again. So you can drop your own URL and API key in here. And now we're ready to use this file. So let's see how that script works. So very easy. I'll zoom in on here. So the first thing we're going to do is set a variable with our Markdown. Easy enough. Just sets that in a variable, does a check to see if it's empty. So you really don't even need to do that. You can probably just do these last 2 steps or do it all in line as 1 step. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to set our curl options. Now these are the things that get sent to the API when we're making a request. Our headers. So the custom functions I'm using have curl request. That's the method we're going to use. We're going to use a post method, which is primarily used when you're sending data to an API. We've got 3 headers here. We're going to say that the type of response that we're expecting and we accept is JSON. And then the content type that we're also delivering to them is JSON. Curl header, there's our API key. You can see that's coming out of that API key field that I put that in. And then I forget what curl dump header is for. Sorry, we'll skip over that. But if you look down here, here's where we assemble essentially the string that we're sending. -d for data. Header is our header data, and then -- data raw means that we're sending raw data, and that's going to be our Markdown. Oh, this substitute in here is required if you have quotes in your Markdown, because this custom function library didn't handle quotes originally. It would send things back as escaped quotes in when it got converted, so it was a little messy. So that's what this substitute function here is for. So pretty easy, set those curl options, and then insert from URL. We're inserting the result of that into our node.html field. And then we are, sorry, I just clicked on the exact same thing. We're sending that to our microservice URL that we recorded in here. And we're specifying those curl options as our curl options from insert from URL. So this it's like I said, a very easy, could be a 2-step script that you have to integrate this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to our content management details page. So here I've got a record. So the changes I've made here are to this right-hand portal of notes. So if I add some Markdown here, test 2, test 3. So here's our next fingers crossed moment. I'm going to hit HTML preview. And there we go. So the thing that's missing out of this, you can see I'm kind of viewing the same response that I was viewing in Postman at this moment, where I'm seeing that it does come back in HTML. It does display in the web viewer as HTML, but I haven't parsed it out of the JSON response yet. So I would just use something in addition to this to say JSON get element from that HTML field and just get me the message content. And then that would just get me this portion of it. And then I would probably do a substitute that just substitutes \n for nothing to remove those out. So small tweaks are needed, but that is essentially start to finish from integrating this Lambda function as a microservice. So where you can go from here is sky's the limit. You know, there are millions, well, maybe not millions, there are thousands at least of JavaScript packages out there freely available that are ready to run with Node right now. You can build your own set of Lambda functions to build your own plugin as a service or microservices plugin. Hopefully this was easy enough to follow along where you can adapt this. The other cool thing is that for this Lambda function, if I can figure out where the monitoring tab is. It's quite cheap to run this as well in the cloud. So you can see like how many invocations I've had. There's a little blue line here for each time I've called this. You can tell how much processing time it's used. Remember, this is billed in the amount of milliseconds that you're using of compute time. So as we're sitting here and this isn't being used, I'm not being charged for it. So this is a very cheap way to have a loosely coupled microservice that's cloud accessible, API accessible. You can copy and paste it to all of your FileMaker apps. You can copy and paste it to your PHP apps, your JavaScript apps, anything that can consume an API can now integrate this markdown conversion microservice. So hopefully you'll, you can go through the demo. By the way, I have a whole set of a white paper that's going to be included in your session materials that you download later. That is essentially this whole demonstration from start to finish. So if you didn't write down npm-v or something, don't worry. Read the white paper. It's all there for you. All right. So back to the slides to flick one over. So this is the very exciting part of our presentation. And again, I can't thank FileMaker enough, Claris enough, sorry, gonna get used to that, for allowing me to be able to test this out, to check out what it is, how it can be used, and just honest to God, how quickly it allows us to integrate APIs and set up things. So first I'm gonna start with a disclaimer. What I'm about to show you is a prototype version. I am going to do the demo live. But the version that we're testing isn't necessarily the version that was shown in the keynote, and it's also, there's no guarantee that what I'm going to show you is going to be in the final version, because it's really being developed organically, responding to our community's need, and changing on a pretty much weekly basis at this point. So that being said, one other thing, Claris is not affiliated with Eventbrite. I'm going to be showing you Eventbrite here. So while the Eventbrite connector is in here, there's no affiliation to Claris or sponsorship of any sort. So let's go ahead and get started. So the use case for this, so I want to treat this as kind of a case study for what we would do. So say it's, Thursday morning, you're sitting in a meeting with your marketing team or your events management team, and you're working at like a nonprofit or an organization where you guys have a CRM that maybe you're tracking your members. So somebody at the table says, well, we're having this fundraising event. We really need event registration for it. So you're sitting there and it's kind of clicking in your head like, okay, great, I have the data API. I can set up a web form. I can use the data API to record that, and then maybe have a database where I send back that, okay, there's no, the number of tickets is going down. We only have 100 tickets or something like that. And then somebody at the table says, well, why don't we just use Eventbrite? And you're like, great. Well, Eventbrite has all of that stuff ready to use already. It has the ability to set up event, take registrations, accept payments, have ticket cutoffs, have windows of openings, staggered ticketing. All of these functions that it does very well. It does that event registration very well. So what if we were to use Eventbrite as a microservice to connect to our database? Because if you just used Eventbrite on yourself, you're fragmenting your data. So you have your users on FileMaker, and you have your registrations over in Eventbrite. So how do you connect those two together? Well, you could do it with consuming the Eventbrite API in FileMaker, but with Claris Connect, you can do it by the time you leave that meeting. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up an event using the Eventbrite service. We're going to use Claris Connect to connect that to FileMaker, and then we're going to do a real-time test of the flow of data. Oof, big breath. All right, so this is, well, we're going to start in Eventbrite first. So in Eventbrite, you get an events dashboard. This is an event I've set up for the session specifically, basically how many tickets you have, some previous tests in here from our dev team, some statistics about your event. So all of this is the fully featured event microservice. So I've already set that up. I've already got an account ready. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into Claris Connect. And there's a couple different names floating around here, so it is Claris Connect. So I'm going to create a new project in here. I'm going to call it INT17. Now you can treat projects as you would for clients or individual FileMaker systems or individual apps. I'm not sure what if there's going to be any limits right now, but if I was using this, I would basically set up a new project for every app that I'm connecting it to. So in here, I'm going to create a flow. And remember, the flow is the flow of that information from one system to the other. So the thing that we want to do is we want to record registrations to our events into our FileMaker system. So I'm going to choose Eventbrite. And now I'm presented with a number of trigger actions that will trigger that Eventbrite service. So I'm going to do order placed. So I'm going to use order placed. I'm going to hit continue. Now Connect is going to tell me, OK, great, let's connect your account. So I'm going to click on Connect New Account. I'm already signed in to Eventbrite with my user account here because I was signed in the other tab. So all I need to do is hit allow. That's it. It's so easy. It's great. So now my Eventbrite account is connected. It's taking care of the OAuth for me. I'm going to continue. It's going to say knocking on the door. It says place an order for an event on an Eventbrite to continue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to, I shortcut the link. And I'm basically going to, oh no, sales ended. Ah. All right. All right. Let's edit this so that, I suppose I shouldn't put the start time of my session as this, should I? All right, order options, edit. Sorry about this. Starts at, let's say it starts at 5 p.m. and ends at 6 p.m. I think that's all I need to do. Let me refresh this page. There we go. All right, that's what I wanted to see. Woof, that was an easy bug fix. Nice. All right, so I'm going to register for one person here. And I'm just going to register myself because I've already registered a bunch of times. So I'm going to hit register here. Now, as I've done that, Connect's been listening in the background, waiting for that action to happen. And it happened. It says, well done, you're all set. So I'm going to hit save. And now I'm ready to do something with that action. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to do an action of connecting my FileMaker server to create a record. So I'm going to create a ticket sales record. So I'm going to create record, continue. I'm going to walk through the same connection process here where I connect, here's where I need to remember if everything was right. Mike Bergy, event management, save. Hopefully that works. Great, that's it. My FileMaker server is connected. Again, super easy. So now we're going to do database name, which I already did, event management. And I have a layout in there called ticket sales. So what that just did when I typed in my database name and my layout name is it went out, got the schema out of that layout, and now is showing me the fields that were on that layout. And for those of you that don't believe me, I'm going to open up my recent, this is the file on that server. So DevCon event management, and here is that ticket sales layout: email name, tickets, event ID, and processed. So Connect is now going to let me take the step data, which is the data coming in from Eventbrite. So when it was listening for that Eventbrite order being placed, it was giving me, it was recording the actual schema coming from Eventbrite for that event registration. And it shows me that sample data in here. You can see Mike Burgee is in here, first name, last name, email address is in here. So now I can map everything out here with step data very quickly. I can do email in here for name. I can do, where was name? Sorry, there's name. Tickets, I just want to say, okay, one ticket. So not only can I do step data, but I can also do hard-coded values in here if I want to do constants or defaults. Event ID, let's grab that. Oops, sorry. Still some weird scrolling stuff when I'm in presentation mode. And processed, I'm going to write 0 because I want to make sure that after I write the ticket sale record to FileMaker that I have a way to process it. So I'm going to use a Boolean of processed to process the record and then mark that as 1 when I'm done processing it. Save. Done. Well, not done. Sorry, one more thing. Right now, I can go in and I can test this. So I can expand any one of these steps and hit the preview and test option to test it. But I'm going to put a large amount of faith in this working, and I'm going to turn it to enabled. So now what I want to do is go back here, and I'm going to go to my dashboard. I'm going to go to events. I added our event in here already and tested it for the attendees. So I'm going to turn on a listener right now. And what the listener does in FileMaker to consume this is it essentially every 10 seconds it does a perform script on server to convert the ticket sales records into attendees. It checks to see if the attendee is already in my database. If not, it creates a new attendee. And then it takes the ticket sale record and turns it into a registration record. So those two scripts are in here. You will get this file as well so that you can read through the logic in here. So I'm going to go ahead and enable that listener. And now comes the fun part. So I want everybody in the audience to help me out for this. So I'm going to open up a new editor and put the URL in here. GoMainSpring.com/devcon2019. And if you can go and register, please, this is going to be on the big screen, so use nice names and email addresses, even if you use fake ones. That's fine. So I want you all to go and register for my event. And we're going to pop this open and see if anything comes in. So that was it. I turned it on. It's ready to go. Every 10 seconds this is going to refresh. Hopefully you guys can register. If you can't register, raise your hand so that I know that part's not working, and I'll try to go back and register myself. But hopefully here we'll see some people coming in. Oh, sorry. GoMainSpring.com/devcon2019. All right. Everybody have the URL? I want to flip back over to watch things coming in. Let me find that window again. I'll move some of this other stuff out of the way so I can have the URL up in the background as well. Oh, sorry. No, I didn't cancel. Oh no. All right. If you've submitted a registration, raise your hand. Ooh, uh-oh. No. So let's see what's going on. So if I go back here, I can view my history. Oh, look at that. Look at all of you that have submitted. So I can go into each one of these and view the history of what was placed. So I can see the body that came in. I can see that this one is you@me.com and the order was placed. Oh, and I am out of time already, jeez. I'm gonna run over it just a little bit, sorry guys. Yeah, I thought my listener was running, but let's see. Oh, something's happening. Oh, look at that. I must have clicked on it with a blind click. So anyways, it's working. That took, like I said, I could be sitting in that meeting and it would work. There you go. All of those people. Awesome. That was just so great. And I'm going to speed through this. I'm sorry for going over. I wanted to do both of these demos, but I also wanted to be very thorough on what I did. So let's really quickly, there's going to be further resources in the Markdown file that you get. There's links to all these things. So when it's updated, please download this. In the FileMaker community, the place you're looking for is integration and integration targets to discuss this. AWS Lambda, I have links in there. And I have a couple links assembled for your blog posts and helpful websites. This session will definitely have updates. So because I was demonstrating Connect here, I couldn't have all of my session materials up front for everybody. Sorry about that. Everything that I showed here today, including the white papers on how to do the Lambda function, are going to be in my final session materials. You'll be able to go get those from devcon/speaker updates. Thank you. Please queue at the microphones for questions and make sure that you fill out evaluations. Again, it's always a pleasure to be here on stage. I'm also presenting tomorrow, so I hope to see some of you there as well. And I am just absolutely ecstatic that everything worked and I was able to demonstrate everything for you in real time. So again, thank you very much. And I'm going to set a timer for 5 minutes for questions so I don't go way far over. So anybody questions? Yes.
Yeah, thank you. 2 quick questions. On the Lambda services, when you set that up for a client, how do you do the billing on that? Do you set up in your own account or do you make the client make their own Lambda account and create it on there?
You can do it either way. We personally, when we're doing it, we set it up on the client's AWS account so they're direct billed for it. But since the microservice is portable, all I have to do is upload the zip file to their account. Also, they can grant you the credentials to be able to administer their Lambda account. So you don't even have to be logged in as them. You can log in with your account. They grant you access. You upload your code there. It's ready to go. You get your API key and everything. Awesome. So you can do it either way. If you want to make it profitable, you can definitely resell it as a service, especially like if you've got a vertical or something, you can integrate it as part of your vertical and then resell that. Lambda supports things like throttling, so you can cut it off at a specific point if it ever gets used too much. So that's something to think about.
And then with the Claris Connect, you had that listener script running to just check and do a find if you had a contact record or attendee record and make one. Could you do that with Claris Connect?
Yes, you can. But I wanted to keep the demo at around 5 minutes. So there is a step we've been testing that is running a FileMaker script from Claris Connect. So you could do 2 actions in a row, one to write the record, then one specifically to process the record, to run a script.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hello, great session there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does the Lambda microservice rely on hits?
On heat?
The pricing on the endpoint hits, like.
Oh, no, it's not on the endpoint hit, it's on the compute time. So the amount of milliseconds of processor power that's being used to run that is metered and charged for. And also the free tier comes with a lot, it's like 1,000 minutes or something of processing time. So I think I extrapolated it out based on my initial test. And for me to use that microservice to get charged for it, I would have to make something like 400,000 requests to it.
Wow.
before I went from the free tier to what I was charged for. And after that, like an hour of compute time is like 25 cents. It's ridiculously cheap.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Right. Couple minutes, anybody else? All right, thank you so much everybody for coming. So happy, thanks.